Yo, this is Kyle Everts. I am back with another live day. We're gonna do a shock and awe live. U.S. captures Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. It's delivering shockwaves around the world, particularly Russia and their allies. I know I have to wish you all a late Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I mean, it's not late if you're celebrating Russian Christmas, but other than that, I am sorry I forgot to wish you all a Happy Merry Christmas. But anyways, today I'm gonna be rolling out with a whole bunch of lives. Not today, but like throughout the month, particularly end of this month. I gotta I gotta test and make sure that everything is up and running. Um, I want to do that. We're gonna be waiting, and yeah, we're gonna be waiting for 7 minutes. C-SPAN. Hold on, view your channel. What item is? Okay. Yeah, Trump will soon. We gotta make sure that this screen is sharing. Yep, it's sharing. Yep, it's sharing. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing this tab, and I'm gonna go to a different tab. It's C-SPAN. Okay, it's not gonna. Alright, I have to share this tab.
Unjustified war in my lifetime. This war is illegal. He says it's embarrassing that we went from the world cop to the world bully in less than a year. Senator Andy Kim also very critical. Republican Congressman Thomas Massey also critical. He says if this action were constitutionally sound, the attorney general wouldn't be tweeting that they've arrested the president of a sovereign country and his wife for possessing guns in violation of a 1934 U.S. firearm law. Having said that, Peter, Republican leadership, the president's Republican allies standing firmly beside him, Senate Majority Leader John Thune posting that he believes this was the right move, as well as House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senator Tom Cotton defending what he believes is the legality of this move as well. So again, I think one of the big questions will be, what does the MAGA base have to say about all of this? We're trying to track what's being said on Steve Bannon's podcast, of course, a former official under the first Trump administration. They had a break, but have repaired that. So far, Peter, the conversation there has been largely supportive. But again, as you note, Peter, everyone is just beginning to process these extraordinary sets of events out of Venezuela.
We're going to be watching these extraordinary sets of events as you describe them, the dramatic developments that continue to develop here, frankly, because in that country right now, they're only a matter of hours after the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the president of that country for 13 years. He succeeded Hugo Chavez, another authoritarian leader there. And frankly, there are a lot of real questions about how the Venezuelan people will react, how the remaining members of the now decapitated regime will react, and what fork in the...
This is a major victory for the United States of America, but also it's going to receive backlash from everybody. Every decision that every U.S. president makes is obviously going to receive backlash, but narco-terrorism should not stand. And this is where my independent political views come in. Yes, I get it. If he didn't consult Congress, he doesn't need to consult Congress if he's defending our nation from narco-terrorism. But what he does need to consult Congress with is the offensive, the attack. Now, to be honest, whoever led the U.S. to capture Maduro is definitely going to get that $50 million bounty on their heads. Nicolas Maduro is the most wanted man in the world, doubling Osama bin Laden's bounty, which was $25 million. Today, Maduro's bounty, as of today, unless it was changed, was $50 million last time I saw. So with that in mind, the world's going to be in shock, particularly the United States, Venezuela, and Russia. Russia's definitely going to be infuriated. They're going to want to try to nuke the United States. And I guarantee you, I'm not throwing conspiracy theories out there. I'm just throwing an honest opinion on what you all think. But I have a feeling Russia's going to want to nuke the United States.
The road, Venezuela.
Which I imagine, again, will be exploited. Attorney, and off to the races then, Peter.
Again, your reference to the former Panamanian president, Manuel Noriega, notably, he surrendered on this day 36 years ago, gives us a bit of a template as we try to get a better understanding of the circumstances happening here. You were talking, Laura, about Pam Bondi, the attorney general, who posted earlier that soon, she said he will soon, about Nicolas Maduro, face the full wrath of American justice. I recognize that it's a bit premature. We don't know all the details about this, but is there any understanding of, we know he's being held on a USS Iwo Jima, a ship that is off the coast of Venezuela right now, where you put someone like Nicolas Maduro when they come to the United States?
Yeah, that's going to be another issue. Where exactly do they hold him? You can't imagine that he's just going to be in a regular cell in the Southern District of New York. Obviously, there are security concerns. There is no natural corollary in history for how this is done, how long he stays on that ship, an open question mark. Typically, there's private transfers that can be arranged in a situation like this to get him to New York, but we still don't know exactly when that will happen. And then again, once he gets here, where does he stay to keep him safe, Peter?
Yeah, we'll be watching that. I mean, it's conceivable that at the end of this day, Nicolas Maduro, who woke up, frankly, facing the barrel of a gun from U.S. forces this morning in Caracas, Venezuela, ends his night in New York City as he prepares to face charges here, as that indictment has now been shared publicly. Laura Jarrett, our senior legal correspondent. Laura, thank you. I want to bring in now our White House correspondent, Monica Alba, who's there in Washington, D.C. Monica, you and I have been speaking back and forth over the course of this morning. Let's just take a moment at 11 o'clock and sort of reset the scene here about these dramatic developments that we've been witnessing. The president at roughly 4:20 this morning making the announcement, Americans waking up to the news that the U.S. was conducting strikes on the ground in and around Caracas, Venezuela, that country's capital city. And not only that, but that the U.S., as the president said, had captured and flown out of the country both Nicolas Maduro and his wife, an operation that he said was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. The operation, he said he would detail further at 11 o'clock. It is now 11 o'clock on the East Coast. We have a team on the ground at Mar-a-Lago. As soon as the president begins his remarks, we will take you there. But Monica, as we've discussed, this really marks a stunning and dramatic culmination of months that have built to this moment. The president's desire to oust Nicolas Maduro, to end drug trafficking from that country to the United States. And ultimately, it ended on the pre-dawn hours in the early days of this year with U.S. forces raiding one of the properties where Maduro had been hiding and bringing him back, in effect, to U.S. soil.
Extraordinary developments overnight, Peter. That's right. And this is something that U.S. officials confirmed to us. The president had been weighing for days. He first approved a plan to potentially do this before Christmas, more than a week ago. Of course, publicly, the president had been at some potential action on land in Venezuela for a very long time. It was unclear exactly in what form that would take. Then there were a couple of days where there were questions about when that would happen, certainly with the president himself announcing just in recent days that there had been an apparent strike on a drug facility on the shore of Venezuela, not necessarily in the heart of a city or in Caracas like what we saw overnight. That raised a ton of questions about what could come next, whether that was an isolated incident, whether there were going to be more similar strikes on land. And we know, according to the president himself, who spoke earlier today, that he said, to potentially carry this out 4 days ago, but the weather was, quote, not perfect. He said essentially that he was going to be monitoring this, but that they needed to have the right window. They needed to have a few more clouds, quote, than we thought. But then once they got the ultimate signal and they waited and they were able to do it, he said all of a sudden it opened up and we said go. Now, the president has been monitoring down in Florida, where we know top administration officials have been coming and going over the last couple of weeks, where he has been holding some high-level meetings, certainly with world leaders, but also continuing to approve and order, as we have seen the Department of Defense announce, the continued strikes on these alleged drug boats. We saw that as recently as leading into New Year's Eve on December 30th and 31st. There were several strikes. It wasn't clear whether they were in the Eastern Pacific or whether they were in the Caribbean, as we have sometimes seen them give that exact detail. But they did release some video, and there was a question of some potential survivors that had come from one of those vessels that the Coast Guard had gone out to potentially attempt a search and rescue on, but ultimately abandoned that. So we know this week, certainly, there have been those incremental developments when it comes to this ultimate decision that the president took overnight. But I think it's really important to point out, Peter, some insight that we got from the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, in that Vanity Fair interview, which was published just in mid-December, where she said that the ultimate goal here of the president was to continue bombing and hitting these alleged drug boats until, like, quote, Maduro cries uncle. That was her phrasing. And we saw the president, again, speak to this openly, speak to this publicly. But for months, the posture of the Trump administration,
bombing them like Yemen. And then Maduro did cry uncle, not gonna lie.
and the White House was that this was not about regime change per se, was that this was about this so-called war on drugs and on narco-terrorists. So this is an incredibly significant development in all of this. And in terms of conversations, Peter,
welcome to the United States of America, where we just leave death and destruction.
know that President Trump says he spoke with Nicolas Maduro, he says, about a week ago. And we know from earlier reporting and conversations that they had spoken sometime before that. So a really important detail there, the fact that it seems from Nicolas Maduro's own words just a few days ago, he had signaled a willingness and openness in some of his communications to engaging with the United States. But the president said earlier today on Fox News, essentially, that he argued that Maduro wanted to perhaps make a deal and that he ultimately told him, nope, we are not going to be able to do that kind of negotiating at the end. He said, essentially, this could have been a very foolish thing if it didn't work out. And ultimately, he said, the president of his conversations with Maduro, nope, we can't do it. What he did with drugs is bad. So I think, Peter, you have set the table perfectly in referencing, and some of our other colleagues have, the president's comments as candidate Donald Trump. It will be fascinating to see how they stack up against what he says today about these foreign involvements, further foreign entanglements, in a moment where his own supporters, and some of them who have been most outspoken and certainly broken with him in recent weeks and months, have argued that the president should stick to his more America first policy instead of getting involved overseas in these continued conflicts. And we saw just over the course of the last couple of weeks examples of that, not just here in Venezuela and South America, but across the world overseas, in the Middle East and beyond, Peter?
I mean, think of it. Israel, though, we had no choice but to get involved. And I'm going to say that. I had to side with Trump on Israel. We had no choice because Israel told President Trump this. If you don't destroy Iran's nuclear program and they get nukes, we are going to nuke Iran. So, yes, Trump did have to bomb Iran. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. Because if he had not done that, Trump would have had to worry about a nuclear war on his hands, making it more disastrous. So yes, him bombing Iran actually extended survivability in peace and prolonging the fateful day of a nuclear war from Iran. That I will say, I do agree with Trump 100% on bombing Iran's nuclear program. Him ending narco-terrorism, striking boats, yes. But you cannot destroy or you cannot kill survivors who are trying to flee. It is a war crime. Now, again, this is where I'm like an independent. I try to hear views from all sides to determine if the president was right or wrong or was in the mix of both. But in this case, capturing a leader, I know one leader that needs to be captured, Vladimir Putin, for all of his terrorism against Ukraine. Now, the problem with that is that would start World War III. That's why we haven't done it yet. However, we had Russian equipment in Venezuela that we just destroyed. So I'm assuming that Putin's going to be furious no matter what. We'll see. Because now that Maduro and his wife are captured, shit's going to escalate beyond imagination. Shit's going to escalate beyond imagination. Shit's going to escalate to a point where it's going to lead to World War III.
A variety of good points there, Monica. I would just punctuate it with another from the president earlier to Fox News today, saying that the U.S. would be, in his words, very involved in the future of Venezuela's oil industry. As we've been reporting here, obviously, the president had ramped up his pressure.
Like I said in the first video regarding the preparations for conflict between the U.S. and Venezuela, the U.S., when they smell oil, they come running. That's really the only thing the troops fight for at this point, besides freedom. But if the government wants oil and they smell it, they're going to destroy that country in order to get it, no matter how many resources it takes or how much money it takes.
Campaign in recent weeks focusing on sanctioned oil tankers there, the first one of which was seized by U.S. forces, brought back to Texas, where the president said it was his presumption that the U.S. would in effect seize that oil as well. The president also made note of the fact that others, including China, will still have access. He said, we're going to allow people to have oil. I bring up the topic of China, as we'll be keeping eyes on as well, because notably a special envoy from China was in Caracas meeting with Nicolas Maduro. The most recent pictures we have of Maduro within the last 48 hours or so. And I think that is a backdrop to all of this that we're going to be watching as well. Monica, I'm going to ask you to stay with us.
Oh, fuck. So it's not just Russia. It's China. Here we go. I'm guaranteeing you this is going to be a cataclysm. I'm guaranteeing you the U.S. capturing Maduro is just the beginning of a hell road ahead.
Just for a second, if we can, I'll ask the control room if you can put up a live picture right now. Our teams, there you are. You can see one of the photographers in the room. Our teams are now inside the Mar-a-Lago property, the South Florida estate of President Trump, where he has been spending most of the Christmas and New Year's holiday. Last night was seen in a photograph there with one of his top advisors, Stephen Miller, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, among others who were there. We do expect to hear from the president. Initially, we were told by him that he would be speaking at roughly 11 o'clock, obviously, on the East Coast. That time has come and gone, so we're going to stay with our live, developing, continuing news coverage in advance of his remarks. But I want to bring in for a second, if I can, our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson, who is joining us now. Hallie, reporters will be invited into this room as well. Surely the president will have some prepared remarks he'll want to deliver, and then likely to face a lot of questions from a lot of reporters, many of them on behalf of Americans and other lawmakers, asking for better understanding about the rationale behind this, the authorities under which he is operating right now. What are some of the top questions in your view that remain to be answered and that you think we're going to hear hopefully some better understanding of in the next few minutes?
Yeah. I mean, Americans want to know. I mean, especially Democrats, they want to know what the hell's going on. Trump, I mean, I get it. Yes, you want to end narco-terrorism, but you also promise peace. And without that, the American people are going to lose faith in you.
You're right, Peter. A slew of them, as you've been covering now for the better part of just about 8+ hours or so here live on the air. Two of them, I think, relate to what you and Monica were just discussing. To your point about the interplay with China here, to the majority of the oil that Venezuela exports to China, how does that come into play for the president here? What about the squaring of this latest action with his campaign promises of no new wars? But I would say, first and foremost, we've got to get, I think there are still some real questions about the basic nuts and bolts of what exactly has gone down here. What happens to Maduro from here? Who does President Trump want to see lead Venezuela? To your point, he said earlier today that he wanted to see the U.S. have a more vigorous role in the leadership of that country. Is it the opposition leader? Is it the vice president of Venezuela currently, who, by the way, has asked to see proof of life of Maduro? What about the congressional authorities here? Who did you notify, and at what point in the operation after it had already begun? Where does this go more broadly, Peter? Colombia could be next, the president had previously warned.
Yeah, because Colombia is now siding with Venezuela. And if that happens, the American people are going to be even more furious.
Heard him this morning talk about Mexico and obviously the U.S. fight against drug trafficking and cartels there. Are those ominous indications that perhaps U.S. intervention in those countries is next? Is the president merely, so to speak, riffing, answering questions on that front? And then, of course, his response to some of the pushback that we've already seen from some of the critics of this action from the president, not just on the left, the Democratic left here, but including from some in his own party, Peter. And I'll send it back to you with that as we keep an eye here on the president's news conference set to begin, we think, shortly.
Hallie Jackson, our senior Washington correspondent. We're going to take a quick pause right now. My colleague Tom Yamas is going to pick up our coverage on the other side. An NBC News special report begins right now.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas.
And good morning. We are coming on the air right now with breaking news. President Trump is set to speak at any moment now about today's large-scale U.S. strike against Venezuela. It's been about 9 hours since multiple explosions rattled Venezuela's capital of Caracas. Since then, President Trump said the U.S. captured that country's leader, Nicolás Maduro, along with his wife, with both of them flown out of the country. And the Trump administration officials saying they will face criminal charges here in the U.S. It comes after months of pressure on Venezuela, including a huge military presence that's been building in the Caribbean. The interception of 2 Venezuelan oil tankers, you'll remember, and strikes, multiple of them, that killed dozens of people on boats accused of drug running. The president also saying today that in the final days before this strike, Maduro wanted to negotiate, but he, President Trump, was done negotiating. At any moment at Mar-a-Lago, we're expecting the president to walk out and to take the podium. We will carry those remarks live. For now, as we wait, I want to go to our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Cuby, to walk us through the attack and the eventual capture of Nicolás Maduro. Courtney, this attack happened under the darkness of night. We understand this was supposed to take place a few days beforehand, but because of weather, they decided to delay it day by day, and then they decided to strike early this morning. Walk our viewers through what happened.
Yeah, but notably, one point on the weather time that I've been struck by is the fact that there was actually a pretty full moon last night, which generally special operators like this don't want. They want as much darkness as possible that does not include a full moon. But you're right. Officials telling us that, in fact, the president actually authorized this action days ago, more than a week ago, and that has now been essentially an hour-by-hour wait to see when the final go-ahead would happen. We now know, as you mentioned, that it started overnight last night, now about 9 hours ago, these first explosions. We don't have a whole lot lot of detail about exactly what the U.S. military component was here. The president, in first announcing this on Truth Social, called these U.S. strikes, not airstrikes. A couple of the assets that we know the U.S. has in the region include U.S. Navy ships that have the ability to fire Tomahawks or T-LAMs. Those are missiles that can fire and strike in a very precise location and give the military standoff capability. Essentially, that means that they can fire them from far enough back that those that are doing the firing, the ship itself, is not necessarily in danger should wherever they're trying to strike, try to counter-strike against them. But the social media videos that we have been seeing do appear to show U.S. military helicopters. It looks like U.S. Chinooks. Those are generally people movers. It wouldn't surprise me, Tom, if we learned that President Maduro and his wife were put on those, or some of the U.S. officials who went in for that ground operation went in on those Chinooks. We also know that the 160th Special Operations Unit, that is of course, you may have heard of them, the Night Stalkers. They were involved in the raid that took out Osama bin Laden in 2011. We know that they have sent additional assets.
SEAL Team 6. Oh, shit. So this SEAL team captured Maduro. Holy shit. So now they didn't just make history once. They just made history last night, early this morning. They killed bin Laden 14 years ago. And then now, 14 and a half years later, or slightly over 14 and a half years later, they captured Maduro. Holy shit.
Assets to the region in recent weeks. Now, it could be that they had some of those up. They have things called little birds. They're small, fast, low-flying attack helicopters. It wouldn't surprise me if we heard that they were involved in this in some way. And then we are also seeing indications that there may have been U.S. Ospreys up. It wouldn't surprise me, again, if those were also used to carry Nicolas Maduro and his wife out of the country and potentially to bring U.S. troops in. But one of the biggest questions that we have, we're hoping we get some fidelity from President Trump and others at this news conference in only moments, is exactly what authorities were used here. So in other words, who was the lead on this operation? If in fact the justification, the legal justification, was to go in and take out Nicolas Maduro because of the indictment against him for narco-trafficking and other alleged offenses, then was the U.S. military used for that? And if so, under what authorities? Again, Tom, the other thing that is really...
Oh, damn. Yeah. If there was justification from U.S. law enforcement, under what authority did the U.S. military have no choice but to get involved, or under what authority did the U.S. choose to get involved or have to get involved? Like, all this is Trump needs to speak up with and open up about. That way we have a more transparency on this.
We're really hoping we get some answers on is the U.S. military in this took strikes on a sovereign nation's military. These were Venezuelan military locations that were targeted in some of the video that you see here.
And if this was all legal, it's strategy. You have to target military locations across that entire enemy nation, either with non-nuclear, nuclear, what else? Missiles, bunker busters, you name it. But bunker busters are only used if the enemy nation has nukes underground.
What were the authorities?
Or are hardened underground with a heavy military resistance that can resist and counterattack.
Under which the U.S. took those strikes. Senator Mike Lee tweeting that Marco Rubio explained to him that the justification for that was to protect the U.S. officials who were going in on the ground, to make sure, essentially like a shaping operation, make sure that they made it as safe as possible for those U.S. officials to go in and take Maduro out. But what was the actual legal authority of those? Those are the kinds of questions that we hope to get to President Trump and officials this morning, Tom.
And then, Courtney, as we get those granular details and as they come in, we may or may not know them. We have to also talk about sort of the intelligence of all of this, right? Because within hours of striking Venezuela, they had the leader of that country and his wife in custody being brought to the USS Iwo Jima, which was there in the waters off of Venezuela. That's incredibly fast. Usually, sometimes in these situations, these heads of state, they have safe houses that they run to, that they hide to. This all happened very fast.
Yeah, it really opens up the question about how the U.S. had such great intelligence. And I think one of the questions, or several of the questions that will be posed to President Trump this morning and to his officials is, were there conversations that were ongoing with Nicolas Maduro himself, with those in his inner circle that helped the U.S. pinpoint exactly where he was going to be at that exact time? And what was it U.S. intelligence? Was it U.S. military intelligence? Was it a combination? How did this all come together?
Or was it?
All right, Courtney, stand by for us. I do want to go back to Peter Alexander, because the big question now, and there are many of them, but the big question right now is who is in charge of Venezuela, right? The Trump administration has been accusing Venezuela of being a narco state, of Maduro being a puppet for the cartels, essentially being a meeting point for the cartels to ship out cocaine around the world and to the United States. Right now, it stands to reason to think the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who has been a student of Hugo Chavez first and then of Maduro, would be in charge. But, Peter, right now it's unclear. And the president has come out today saying that he hopes whoever takes over Venezuela, whoever's in charge, goes in a different direction than Maduro.
Tom, I should tell you, as you're speaking to me, I'm hearing from our colleagues on the ground at Mar-a-Lago.
Agreed. I have to agree. Hopefully, whoever's in charge of this nation,
that we now have a 2-minute warning, which means
can lead Venezuela in the right direction.
We'll hear from the
and be an ally to the United States, maybe even join NATO. We'll see.
President now in just a matter of moments. So I'll keep this very brief for you, but I would say that is high on the list of questions is after the operation that has proven successful clearly to be able to capture Nicolas Maduro and his wife, what other plans were already in place? Who is governing that country? Is it Maria Corina Machado? She was the former or the longtime opposition leader there. Her name may be familiar because she recently won the Nobel Peace Prize and had a remarkable departure from that country where she accepted the award overseas in public. Separately, a lot of real questions about what takes place now going forward, what the U.S. has done to try to better secure the situation on the ground there to ensure that there is some form of a peaceful transition. Venezuelans are still waking up to this dramatic news. And then finally, and separate from this, I think there are going to be a lot of broad questions about the TikTok, exactly how all this came to be this morning, and about the president's sort of policies around the world right now. The president who came to power with a desire, he said, to end wars has now initiated strikes in many countries: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Nigeria, Somalia, now Venezuela as well, in addition to the Pacific and the Caribbean. All the questions top of mind for me as I await the president's remarks moments from now.
All right, Peter, you stand by for us as well. I can tell you we are coming to you live tonight, or I should say today, from Miami, where the streets, especially in Doral, where our studios are, people have been celebrating there in the streets here in Doral, Venezuelan Americans and then Cuban Americans and Nicaraguan Americans as well, hoping that this could somehow lead to a domino effect in the Caribbean, in Latin America, where leftist dictators are taken out and new governments, hopefully, are reinstated. This is Miami right now in Doral. You can see the Venezuelan flags flying there. There's been an influx of Venezuelan immigrants, some saying up to 700,000 over the last 5 to 10 years, people fleeing Venezuela because of the economic hardships there, because of the lack of human rights in Venezuela. We should remind you that Maduro was accused by the UN of killing up to 5,000 dissidents, imprisoning anybody who did not agree with his political policies, and torturing them as well. So for many people in Venezuela and here in the United States who have sought refuge, who are political refugees, this has been a very important time. You can see there are tears in people's eyes. They have been celebrating on the streets of Miami since these strikes were first announced. We were awoken early this morning, and I have a lot of friends and family in this area, and the phone was just kept ringing, people asking questions. What does this mean for Venezuela? What does this mean for the people of Cuba as well? Again, we can't get too ahead of ourselves right now. The president has just said they've taken out Maduro because he was wanted. He was indicted not once, but now twice, from what the Attorney General Pam Bondi has told us, for being an agent of the cartels, for being, in their words, a narco trafficker. He will stand trial in the U.S. and he will get his day in court, and he will have attorneys provided to him if he can't pay for them, and he will have a say in this. But for right now, he is in U.S. custody. It is unclear who is leading Venezuela at this hour. If indeed it is more members of the Maduro regime, if it is the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who has been there, who has been asking the international community for proof of life to make sure Maduro and his wife are still alive. We have heard from Russia and other countries who are supporters of Venezuela, who are allies of Venezuela, saying they condemn the actions that have happened here. The UN as well has come out and said that they did not agree with how this was handled. You can see the explosions, the eruptions. This was the attack earlier this morning in Venezuela, right there in the capital. And then from the moment those missiles launched, at some point within hours, they had the leader of Venezuela in custody. The president has said that Maduro at the end was trying to negotiate, but he was done negotiating. The vice president has come out on X posting that they offered multiple off-ramps to Maduro. Again, they have been in this region for months now, striking those boats they say are carrying drugs from Venezuela to the United States. The threats have been made. There apparently were negotiations up until last week between the president and Maduro, that according to President Trump. But at this hour, President Trump was done negotiating. I want to bring up moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who's joining our special coverage as we await the president. We do want to remind you, at any moment, we're going to watch President Trump come in. Kristen, this is an interesting time.
Here's the thing. This is normal. When leaders who know that they're going to lose and get captured or killed, they want to all of a sudden negotiate. Like, when you have months to negotiate, and then when it comes time for you to face your judgment for your actions, and when you just do decide to negotiate, it's already too late. Like, we're already seeing that effect play out.
Time in our country's history, but it's also an interesting time for the Trump administration. They are an America First administration. That's what they campaigned on. And now we have a strike in a foreign country, in a country that has been accused of sending drugs by the tons into the United States, but has never attacked our country. And now we have a military operation, and a leader in that country has been taken out by U.S. forces.
Tom, you're absolutely right. And what is so striking is that we have seen cracks begin to form within the MAGA base as President Trump has escalated his pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro, against the Venezuelan regime. And now, of course, this reaction just pouring in. It's coming in largely along party lines right now, Tom. We should say that. Democrats highly critical, saying that this is illegal without congressional approval. Congressional leaders, Republicans, supportive. But look at this from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She, of course, had a very public break with President Trump, in part because of his focus on foreign policy, which she says goes against his America First foreign policy. Here she says, Mexican cartels are primarily and overwhelmingly responsible for killing Americans with deadly drugs. If U.S. military action and regime change in Venezuela was really about saving American lives from deadly drugs, then why hasn't the Trump administration taken action against Mexican cartels? And then,
oh, shit. She's spitting facts. But Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, let me tell you something. If Trump landed troops in Mexico, he would have to get Mexican approval because cartels are in Mexico, and Mexico has a good military force. However, Mexico has a government who does or does not like the cartels. It depends. I don't know which side the Mexican government's on. So that's why I'm saying does or does not like the Mexican cartels, because I don't really know. But if the Mexican government is anti-cartel and Trump decided to send troops there, it would be an invasion and it would be war, not just between the U.S. and the cartels, but between Mexico forces, U.S. forces, and cartel forces. Now, not only that, that will bring China into the mix, and I'm going to tell you why. The cartels are employed by China, using fentanyl, bringing it into the United States through open borders like Joe Biden's policies, or just using people in the U.S. to traffic drugs. And again, they are employed by China. So if the U.S. goes to war with Mexico again, it will be World War III because, again, the cartels are, in fact, employed by China.
Listen to this part of her post, Tom. She says, this is what many in MAGA thought they voted to end. Boy, were we wrong. As the baby boomers slip away, both in voters and power, the electoral future will be decided for candidates that focus on American economic populism and promising prosperity for Americans only. Really strong words there from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Tom, just to zoom out a little bit, let's remember what President Trump campaigned on, what that America First foreign policy was all about. He campaigned on getting Americans out of foreign wars. That was part of the inaugural address that he delivered when he said that that would be a part of his vision. And so part of why you're seeing these cracks begin to form within the MAGA base is for that very reason. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of those with the loudest voices, saying that her constituents care about the economy, issues like health care, and that this runs counter to those critical promises that were made. So I think questions moving forward, will Congress be briefed? When will there need to be congressional approval for any future action? And what, if any, reaction will we get from the rest of the MAGA base?
The problem is that the president does have authority. Now, again, him striking boats, yeah. Narco-terrorism, that's defense. He doesn't need congressional approval. Now, he can consult Congress at his discretion. Now, on the offense, though, yes, he has to consult Congress. It's written stone in the Constitution. But in the Constitution, it also states the President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, ground, naval. It doesn't say air because at that time we didn't have an Air Force, but he's in command of the Air Force, nuclear forces, etc., special operations forces, etc. He's in command of the entire military. That is his role. And that says that in the Constitution. Again, he does need to consult Congress. It also states that. But defensively, he can consult Congress at his own discretion.
Base, Tom.
Yeah, Kristen, we're about to go to Keir Simmons, but Kristen, I had an opportunity to speak with Maduro years ago. I interviewed him inside of Venezuela, and his belief was that President Trump never wanted him out. It was others around President Trump, people at the time like Senator Rubio, now the Secretary of State, who were the ones sort of whispering in President Trump's ear to get Maduro out. And now this has become a reality. And we know that Senator Rubio is now Secretary of State Rubio, who's been in charge with multiple jobs, including intelligence as well. Talk to me about that relationship and the role that the secretary.
Trump's picking the wrong people. If this is true, if this is an actual reality for Maduro, and if it's an actual reality for Americans, just hearing this, that shows you Trump picked the wrong people. That's going to make his administration look bad.
Secretary of State played in all of this.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Secretary Rubio has long had his sights on Venezuela, the concerns, the criticism of Nicolas Maduro. And look at what we have seen from this relationship between President Trump and Secretary Rubio. Remember, they were fierce political rivals back on the campaign trail in 2016. Now, of course, brought into the fold in this second Trump administration has become, quite frankly, Tom, one of his most trusted advisors. When you ask President Trump about the future of MAGA, who should take the baton, he talks about the vice president, but he also talks about Secretary Rubio. And I think it really underscores the strength of that relationship, Tom.
Okay, Kristen, stand by for us. Again, we are waiting for President Trump to walk out at any moment at Mar-a-Lago to take the podium. We're going to bring you those comments live as they happen. We also want to let you know that President Trump has released what we understand is video of Maduro in custody and also some video of the attack. We're going to have those momentarily. As I mentioned earlier, Keir Simmons is part of this coverage as well. Keir, I want to go to you. At the time that the United States has just taken out the leader of Venezuela, they've been trying to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. This incredibly complicates both those negotiations and also it leaves sort of, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a vacuum, but there are questions about who's in charge in Venezuela right now and what role does the U.S. play in that?
Yeah, it's hard.
Agreed. Now this is going to complicate and extend peace deal troubles.
To find words, isn't it, Tom? And it's not.
We're supposed to be a nation of peace, but it looks like we're a nation of chaos.
surprising because we haven't seen an intervention, a U.S. intervention in Latin America like this since the 1980s. We do know, though, of course, Tom, from more recent history.
I should say since the 1960s. I mean, but then again, if there was a lot of intervention in the 1980s, then I wasn't even born. My dad was probably my dad was born in 86. So if it was, and if the intervention ended before my dad was born, then yeah, my dad doesn't even know about it. But
that regime change is unpredictable. Once you remove a leader in a country, what happens next, that is in question. And members of Maduro's regime are saying that there is stability and that this didn't work effectively. So there are huge questions. And around the world, America's adversaries and allies will be watching and waiting to see what plays out now. There has been some criticism.
Agreed.
Significantly from the French foreign minister saying this kind of intervention is effectively, he says, it is wrong. And I think that's striking in terms of the breaks in international diplomacy that we have seen in 2025. But if leaders around the world, Tom, didn't get the message in 2025, they're getting it now at the beginning of 2026. The Trump administration messaging quite clearly, you must bend to our will. And as you say, questions from many, many countries, not least Russia. President Putin was very close to Maduro. They are allies. What does this mean for Russia? Is this a weakening of Russia? Is this effectively, a strike by the Trump administration against Russia as well as against Venezuela, against Russian interests? So
I mean, again, Russia did send some troops and equipment, and I want somebody to tell me that I'm wrong. Do your research, because I've done mine. Russia sent over a couple of their modern defense systems, which are still obsolete against American technology, but can do some damage, but not as much as Putin thinks that they can do. But the thing is, with this, I call this strike a big leap in U.S. history, especially if SEAL Team 6 captured Maduro, then they just made more history. But it will not only weaken Russian interests, but piss off Russia to a point where they keep threatening nukes, and Trump's just laughing at his threats, deploying nukes of their own. But it's also going to stop Russian and Chinese influence in the West. Hopefully. I'm not going to count on that because China's pretty stubborn, but the U.S. is a lot more stubborn. And Trump sent a clear crystal message. I have to say that. He sent a clear crystal message to Russia. Bow down to my peace deal or it's over. He sent a message to China. Don't do any stupid shit against Taiwan or it's going to end bad for you. He sent a message to Iran. You make nukes, we destroy you. Basically. And all the other countries he attacked in 2025. Remember that.
Certainly, in the U.S. national security strategy at the end of last year, what we were told is that the U.S. believes the Western Hemisphere is its area, that it wants to assert itself, and it certainly is with this strike overnight. And that assertion is directed at Russia. It's also directed at the Iranians, who had a close relationship with the Maduro regime, and there are protests in Iran right now. What will the Iranian leadership be thinking? It's also directed at China, as Peter Alexander said earlier.
I knew it.
We saw Chinese officials with Maduro just in the past few days. What message does this send? Because the Chinese were trying to say, this is our friend, don't usurp him. Well, that didn't work.
No, it didn't. Trump just literally fucking laughed at their bluff and said, fuck you, we're taking him out. See, Trump's got balls because he knows that he's the most powerful country in the world. And I would take advantage of that every second I have. But the thing is, if Trump literally that sends a message to Russia. He's literally going to strike them next if they don't bow down to his peace deal. He did that, and he sent the message to all of U.S. adversaries and enemies. Listen, and allies. listen, you don't bow down to me, it's over. He sent a message not just to he sent a message to everybody across this globe. Not in space, but I hope we don't have space wars soon. But yeah. What are we gonna have next? Star Wars? I hope not. But yes, we're becoming an imperial empire. I mean, we have hundreds of bases overseas. So even if U.S. went to war with China, U.S. can overrun China's one military base that's overseas. So, yeah. You're welcome. So, yeah. Let's see.
Keir, I do want to talk to you because you've done a lot of reporting about China's encroachment in this region as well. We can't talk about Venezuela and what's just happened and not talk about the oil reserves there. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, in many ways feeding the countries that are not friends to the United States. The president has spoken about the oil that was taken, he says, by Venezuela that was U.S.'s oil from U.S. companies. This is going to complicate matters because it's unclear what happens with the oil production in Venezuela going forward.
Oh,
yeah, no question. And the Russians.
What the fuck if Venezuela actually took U.S. oil? Holy shit. That's actually a legit reason to go after Venezuela. That's actually a legit reason. If they're actually stealing Americans and American oils and American jobs from oil companies and stealing American economics. Oh shit. Oh god, yeah. If the US actually admits Venezuela as a state, holy shit. China will never be able to catch up economically. Militarily, yeah. Economically, no. Just imagine if Venezuela was that and then the North American continent, like the North American continent united under US rule, China will not only be never able to catch up economically, but it might not be even able to catch up militarily. Number of personnel, yeah, but like military equipment, no.
Are playing a role in the Venezuelan oil industry as well. We should say, Tom, you can't just switch on the taps in Venezuela with that oil industry. It does have massive reserves, but it doesn't. It's not an industry that just can start working immediately. So the implications for the oil markets may be muted. And obviously, just a counterpoint to that, this kind of destabilization, if you like, can have implications in financial markets. We will see on Monday when that comes about. But you mentioned China. It's an important point. China has been encroaching in South America, in Latin America, particularly with rare earths, rare minerals. That kind of commodities, which are now so important to the world economy. And I think that the U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere, that's a major point here too. A message again from the United States in the Western Hemisphere to countries around the world. We don't like you intervening in inverted commas in our region. I mean, this is stunning. In some ways, though, it is not surprising, Tom. It does play into U.S. foreign policy in the region over decades and even over centuries. And I think from that history, what we do know, of course, is that you don't know what happens next. That's what we have to watch for.
Again, we're waiting.
You don't know what happens next because by the time you realize history repeats itself, it's already too late.
President, at any moment, he was supposed to come out at 11 a.m. But again, this is a time when things are very fluid. We are going to bring you his comments as soon as he comes on. Keir, I do want to get back to you. Venezuela now a region in conflict, right? You have a country that has no leader. It's unclear who is in charge right now, if it's the vice president.
A region in anarchy until leadership is restored, but not dictator like freedom leadership.
You have an opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, who is being celebrated across the world. Before that, you had another opposition leader, Juan Guaido, that was acknowledged by the United States going back 4 years as the true leader of Venezuela. And then you have the Venezuelan military, right, who is really holding the cards right now. But besides that, you have what is known as a colectivo, essentially neighborhood gangs that Maduro has armed so they stay loyal to him. Essentially, in Venezuela, where there's no work, there is no money, there is no food, he has given these people food, he has given them weapons so they stay loyal to him. So you have the military and you have sort of these neighborhood ragtag gangs that there's been reporting now that they are actually protecting some military installations. To give you an idea of sort of the military prowess, if you will, of Venezuela. It's just not there that they have neighborhood watchmen, if you will, armed with machine guns protecting their military sites. But it all speaks to
if U.S. strikes them, they can't protect shit against incoming missiles.
Who's going to be in charge and who's going to take over. And it sounds like President Trump, at least from now, is not pushing for a regime change. Even though he's taken out the leader of the country, he's saying whoever comes next, he hopes is not like Maduro, but he's assuming the vice president is in charge.
Yeah, and President Trump, and I'm sure we will hear it when we hear from President Trump in a moment. President Trump was asked earlier in an interview who will lead Venezuela, and he said, well, we're going to have to look at that right now. That kind of comment will prompt criticism from some that there needs to be a strategy here rather than simply just the tactic of removing Maduro. We have seen pictures, Tom, of civilians on the streets in Venezuela in support of Maduro. And you're right. If you are Venezuelan sitting at home right now, cowering perhaps a little bit, wondering what happens next, and you are against the Maduro regime, you are trying to calculate whether if you walk out onto the streets, you will become a victim. Will you be supported by the US? Will those forces that Maduro built up around him that you so eloquently describe, will they target you? These kinds of things we know because we've seen this.
Again, Venezuela is in straight up anarchy. That's what we're seeing in Venezuela right now. No leadership, no government. And as they mentioned earlier in the live, Venezuela's government is decapitated, gone. No leadership. Right now, it's assumed that the vice president of Venezuela is in charge. What? I hope the vice president of Venezuela realizes, hey, they took out the president. I can't get like him. That's what I hope the Venezuelan vice president realizes. Because if he doesn't, then Trump is going to have to do a regime change like he pretty much did to Iran when he bombed their nuclear sites.
Kind of thing before, and you have to be careful with comparisons. But if you take, for example, the U.S. experience in Iraq, where of course Saddam Hussein was removed, so that was regime change. What the U.S. then faced was a challenge about who should run the country, how the country should be run, and a civil war. Now, you do have to be careful with these comparisons. Completely different part of the world, but the principles are familiar. And the question of whether you can change a country, make it more stable, maybe even make it democratic, with kinetic power that doesn't involve boots on the ground, is a looming question here. And of course, the U.S. has tried boots on the ground before, and that in the past, in some parts of the world, hasn't worked.
Agreed.
Here, stand by for us, because we now are seeing these images that are stunning that President Trump has posted on social media. This is the former leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, in handcuffs. You can see those blacked out sunglasses over his eyes. He is wearing the earmuffs as well. He looks to be in a tracksuit, likely the same outfit they took him in custody, and we don't know that for sure, but it looks like he's been scuffed up there. You can see his hands there, given a bottle of water. This is the first image we've seen of the former leader of Venezuela.
Oh shit, so there is actual proof that Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro, is in custody. Okay.
And now in U.S. custody aboard what we believe is the USS Iwo Jima. Again, the president putting out this photo. He will stand trial, it appears, in New York. He was indicted in both the Southern District of Florida and in New York for charges stemming of drug trafficking, being a narco-terrorist, colluding with the cartels, allowing his country to be a meeting point, to be in a shipping point for they said millions of tons. I don't know if that exact figure is correct, of cocaine coming.
If it is correct, we just literally, hopefully, if Venezuela's vice president ain't like Maduro, we just basically stopped millions of tons of cocaine right there. But then our number one focus should have been the cartels in Mexico, but hopefully that's Trump's next focus. And then he could focus on the peace deals in the Middle East.
Out of Venezuela.
Well, you should focus on Colombia and Mexico. Focus on nations that are causing trouble near the mainland United States and Alaska. And then arm Alaska in case of a Russian invasion after this operation.
To the United States and around the world. His wife also taken into custody. And if you're wondering why his wife was also taken...
Why the wife?
Into custody, she has held many roles in Venezuela in the political hierarchy. Wife was also taken into custody. She has held many roles in Venezuela in the political hierarchy, once as attorney general, once as the leader of parliament. Some have said she's as popular as her husband, Nicolas Maduro. So both of them have been taken into custody. Of course.
Oh my God. So his wife was a politician of Venezuela. Holy shit.
Maduro rising to power after Hugo Chavez was dying of cancer. He was in his third term, 2 of his elections deemed completely illegal by the international community. Even his last election, more Venezuelans voting for the opposition party, and yet he stayed in power as a true dictator in Latin America, building ties with places like Cuba, building ties with Russia and Iran and China, maintaining those relationships throughout. And he simply ran out of time in President Trump's side. We will hear from the president in a matter of moments. Our Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, has been reporting from Latin America, from Colombia, when these strikes started. Richard, you've been watching all this information. You saw that image just posted of Nicolas Maduro. Not exactly the same story, not exactly the same case, but reminiscent of when they took out Saddam Hussein, a similar image. You know, these images are very important to President Trump as well. Again, 2 completely different situations, 2 different military actions, but the visuals are very similar here.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar. And I think it's no surprise President Trump is a little bit late in coming out to make his remarks. I think it's no accident that that image was released first. This is the image that President Trump wanted to show Venezuelans, wanted to show Americans, wanted to show the world. A dictator who stood up, who refused to accept President Trump's policies, who said no, and who's now in handcuffs with earmuffs on so that he won't know what is being said around him, won't know where he is. A man who went from a palace to now going to a courtroom and potentially a jail cell. A very powerful image.
Or potentially execution for all the lives he's killed.
Image that will be seen in Venezuela by the people, but also by the leadership. I've been speaking to people today who've been involved in this negotiation process that has been both diplomatic and a negotiation process by force over the last several months to try to get Maduro to leave on his own. And what we've seen and have been talking about all day is this escalation. First, there were the attacks on boats. Then there was this seizures of the oil tankers. Then a land attack. Then ultimately a snatch and grab operation to take Nicolas Maduro. You were talking about the leadership. Right now, there clearly is a power vacuum. I was speaking with a senior official who is also involved in this negotiation process, this pressure campaign, who said the most important person in Venezuela right now is the defense minister Padrino, that he effectively is managing the country as it goes through this transition. We don't know yet if this was a successful regime change that will lead to a democratic future and a better future that could see the opposition leader, who was just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, take power and a smooth transition, or if this regime change will lead to state collapse and civil war. It was a bold move. It was a successful military operation. The militias are still somewhat on the streets, but this was a dictatorship built around Maduro, around his cult of personality. And without Maduro, the military is much diminished. And that photo is clearly designed to impact people like the defense minister Padrino, to say, be careful with your next move. You should make peace with the political party, or you could be the next to get snatched and sent to an American warship and ultimately, most likely, an American prison.
Yep. And Richard, it's fair to say from your reporting in the region, you were in Colombia, the president's actions even today have left.
They need to put this fucking dude in protective custody. Otherwise, he's going to be the bitch of so many people. He's going to be getting fucked by so many, you know what, in prison. But they should send him to the harshest prison camp. Why? So he can get the Bubba treatment. So he can get beat the shit out of. But then again, we can't have him dead because he's a crucial piece of intelligence. So yeah, you're wondering why I'm having two different sides, because I kind of see views from both sides. But in this case, they actually have to have this dude in protective custody. Otherwise, he's going to be dead fresh meat. Because he's a high value. He's a leader of a foreign country. He's the high value target. He's probably the most high value target in America right now.
Allies have left enemies guessing, even confused. I remember speaking to the Colombian president. He came out on social media and said one thing about President Trump, and then you spoke to a defense minister, and they said something completely different.
This President Trump wants the region to be afraid of him. And many White House officials talk about President Trump's unpredictability, and that fear is palpable.
Okay, Richard, I need to interrupt you. Richard, I'm going to interrupt you. President Trump is taking the podium. Let's listen in.
Appreciate you being here. Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular
Navy SEALs
assault. And it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently.
In 2025.
In an operation known as Midnight Hammer. All perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife.
How many troops did we lose for Navy SEALs? We probably lost none.
Celia Flores.
That's just my guess.
Both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. It's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, They were different days. We're a respected country again, maybe like never before. These highly trained warriors operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea. We're just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position. But they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far. With capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have. And you see that even if you just look at the boats. We've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average, 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run
Here's the problem, though. You also have to worry about the Mexican cartels, which produce the one of the deadliest drugs, fentanyl, employed by China.
Country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. And that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. Yeah. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now, they're on a ship. They'll be heading to ultimately New York, and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over, in particular, the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang, Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they call police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly. And now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago. A little bit of a different kind of a threat. But we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6-7 months. We used to have on average two a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're walking their daughters, they're walking their children, their wives, they walk to restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military, and I want to thank law enforcement. Been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know, in
7 weeks.
We're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now. And
7 weeks, Donald. Here's the thing, though. The National Guard one National Guard member died a day before Thanksgiving. And that was, I believe, so 26th of November. $30 days. 6. Hold on. 38 days, almost going on 6 weeks, but not quite. It's nowhere near 7 weeks, though.
Crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but crime is down now 77%. And the governor of Louisiana called, great person, and he wanted us to help him, as you know, in a certain very nice part of Louisiana. and we have done that. And it was a rough section, and we have crime down. I understand it's down to almost nothing already after 2.5 weeks. New Orleans, it's down to almost nothing. And we've only been there for 2.5 weeks. Can't imagine why governors wouldn't want us to help. We also helped, as you know, in Chicago, and crime went down a little bit there. We did a very small help because we had no working ability with the governor. The governor was a disaster and the mayor was a disaster, but it knocked down crime. But we're pulling out of there when they need us. We'll know. You'll know. You'll be writing about it. And likewise, Los Angeles, where we saved Los Angeles early on, where the head of the police department made a statement that if the federal government didn't come in, we would have lost Los Angeles. That's long after the fires. That's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it whatsoever, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need the credit. But we'll be pulling out when they need us. They'll call, or we'll go back if we have to. We'll go back. But we did a great job in various cities. The place that we're very proud of is Washington, D.C., because it's...
I think it was like the 52nd Marine Division. The 52nd Marine Division. Oh, my God. Deploy those fucking Marines to Chicago. They don't give a fuck about your feelings. If you loot or try to hurt a police officer, the Marines from that division, they don't give a fuck. They will shoot. Because they sent a clear message to violent rioters in Los Angeles. You loot, we shoot. They didn't give a fuck. Send those Marines into freaking Chicago or New York or even Philadelphia. Gangsters will be afraid real quick. Or better yet, send them to Colorado Springs, Colorado, because Colorado Springs, Colorado, shockingly, and I have done research on this as well, is the murder capital of the United States. Homicides doubled. Baltimore, Maryland, is the safest city where there's really almost no homicides. Yeah.
It's our nation's capital. We took it from being a crime-ridden mess to being one of the safest cities in the country. But the gangs that they sent raped, tortured, and murdered American women and children. They were in all of the cities I mentioned, Tren de Aragua. And they were sent by Maduro to terrorize our people. And now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives were so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst. They say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungari. What happened to her? They, as you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons, a little bit more.
Here's the thing, though. Maduro should have unleashed his fucking violent criminals against these Muslim terrorists. That'll keep Sharia law in check. That's what he should have done. He should have sent his violent criminals to Islam, terrorized them. Then Maduro wouldn't have to worry about being arrested. Well, maybe for the drugging part, but the violent murderer part released from his prisons to the U.S., he wouldn't have to worry about that charge. But if Maduro released his violent criminals against the Islamic regimes and terrorized Sharia law with violence, we wouldn't have a Muslim takeover across the entire world. Though it's not bad, Trump needs to keep it in check before it gets out of hand.
More hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and sold American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela.
I mean, you have a little room to talk because you actually did something that's actually a lot closer to our borders. But you're also fighting wars 10,000 plus miles away, Trump. So I wouldn't talk much if I were you about that part.
Oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill. And the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country, considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. Yeah. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first term. We had great dominance in my first term. We have far greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs are, they've made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power.
Here's the problem, though, Trump. You know, I'm not against like the 2,000 checks or anything. I mean, I'm not doing this for money or anything. But the problem with that is that you would have to at least spend $660 billion on the stimulus checks for every American. Now, if you only made like $330 billion of tariffs, you can only do half that. But Trump, I guarantee you always find a way.
And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just, fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist, Maduro, is finally gone in Venezuela. People are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation. This morning, it's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raising Cane. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him. And I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you explain how the U.S. will run Venezuela?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Finally, a commander-in-chief the world respects and the American people deserve. And as the president said, words can barely capture the bravery and the power and the precision of this historic operation. A massive joint military and law enforcement raid flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans our country has to offer. American warriors are second to none, the best in the world and the best of our country. What all of us witnessed last night was sheer guts and grit, gallantry, and glory of the American warrior. I'm simply humbled by such men. And I tip my hat to our chairman, Dan Raising Cane, and all those Americans who stood watch last night. Our warriors are the elite of America. And again, President Trump has your back. No other country on planet Earth, and it's not even close, could pull this kind of operation off. And no other president has ever shown this kind of leadership, courage, and resolve. The most powerful combination the world has ever seen. As the president said, our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. Yep. The coordination, the stealth, the lethality, the precision, the very long arm of American justice, all on full display in the middle of the night. Nicolas Maduro had his chance.
Yes, he did.
Just like Iran had their chance.
Yes, they did.
Until they didn't and until he didn't.
Yep.
He effed around and he found out.
He fucked around, found out, just what Iran did with their nuclear program. They fucked around, they found out. Now the world has got that message pretty clear in their heads. Fuck around, find out from the United States.
President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. This is about the safety, security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people.
Mm-hmm.
This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026. And under President Trump, America is back. I'd like to welcome now our Chairman Raising Cane, to give a few more details about the operation. Mr. Chairman.
There's the 4-star general.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. Last night, on the order of the President of the United States,
that general looks like he's 5-star. He might be. I don't know.
And in support of a request from the Department of Justice, as the President said, the United States military conducted an apprehension mission in Caracas, Venezuela.
Oh, he's 4-star. I don't know what that circle means. That probably replaces the 5th star, but oh well. I don't care about that, but I want to hear more.
Venezuela, to bring to justice 2 indicted persons, Nicolas and Cecilia Maduro. This operation, known as Operation Absolute Resolve, was discreet, precise, and conducted during the darkest hours of January 2nd, and was the culmination of months of planning and rehearsal, an operation that, frankly, only the United States military could undertake. What I'd like to do this morning is talk to you through some of the preparation and the details without compromising any of our tactics, techniques, and procedures. There is always a chance that we'll be tasked to do this type of mission again. Our interagency work began months ago and built on decades of experience of integrating complex air, ground, space, and maritime operations. While the past 2 decades have honed the skills of our special operations forces, this particular mission required every component of our joint force, with soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians working in unison with our intelligence agency partners and law enforcement teammates in an unprecedented operation. We leveraged our unmatched intelligence capabilities and our years of experience in hunting terrorists. And we could not have done this mission without the incredible work by various intelligence agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and NGA. We watched, we waited, we prepared, we remained patient and professional. This mission was meticulously planned, drawing lessons from decades of missions over the last many years, many missions over these last many years. This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. An extraction so precise, it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose: to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. Failure of one component of this well-oiled machine would have endangered the entire mission, and failure is never an option for America's joint force. Those in the air over Caracas last night were willing to give their lives for those on the ground and in the helicopters. Let me talk a little bit about the preparation. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets. In early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise, and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel, so as the president said, they could be brought to justice. And as the president said earlier today, weather in Venezuela is always a factor this time of the year. And over the weeks through Christmas and New Year's, the men and women of the United States military sat ready, patiently waiting for the right triggers to be met and the president to order us into action. Last night, the weather broke just enough, clearing a path that only the most skilled aviators in the world could maneuver through. Ocean,
mountain, low cloud ceilings. But when tasked with a mission, this organization does not quit. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern time last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49. And there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force and self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life. After securing the indicted persons, the force began to prep for departure. Helicopters were called in to exfiltrate the extraction force, while fighter aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft provided overhead coverage and suppressive fire. There were multiple self-defense engagements as the force began to withdraw out of Venezuela. The force successfully exfiltrated and returned to their afloat launch bases, and the force was over the water at 3:29 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with indicted persons, and both Maduro and his wife were embarked aboard the USS Urima. In closing, what we've witnessed today is a powerful demonstration of America's joint force. We think, develop, we train, we rehearse, we debrief, we rehearse again and again, not to get it right, but to ensure that we cannot get it wrong. Our jobs are to integrate combat power so when the order comes, we can deliver overwhelming force at the time and the place of our choosing against any foe anywhere in the world. I am immensely proud today of our joint force and filled with gratitude to represent them here today. There is simply no mission too difficult for these incredible professionals and the families that stand by them and support them. As we stand here,
no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great. No mission too great, no sacrifice. No mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great. That's from the 1st Platoon during World War II.
Here this morning, our forces remain in the region at a high state of readiness, prepared to project power, defend themselves, and our interests in the region. This operation is a testament to the dedication and unwavering commitment to justice and our resolve to hold accountable those who threaten peace and stability. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the brave men and women who executed this mission. Their courage and tireless commitment to our nation are what makes us strong. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have much to add to what you've heard now, other than the following points. Nicolas Maduro was indicted in 2020 in the United States. He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognized him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward, which I guess we saved $50 million. And
We should make sure.
yeah, exactly. But
Don't let anybody claim it. Nobody deserves it but us.
But I want to be clear about one thing. Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight. The other message here is the following. You have a guy, like many people around the world, they like to play games. You have a guy who decides he's going to invite Iran into his country, is going to, do the confiscation of American oil companies, is going to flood our country with gang members, is going to take Americans prisoner and try to hold them for hostage and trade them like he was able to do with the Biden administration. Basically likes to play games all this time and thinks nothing's going to happen. And I hope what people now understand is that we have a president. The 47th president of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. I can tell you, I've watched this process now for 14, 15 years, been around it. Everybody talks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this. We're going to take. This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States. And the president addressed it. There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now, very happy. But instead, he wanted to play big boy. And so now, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And but I think that the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody, but don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office because it's not going to turn out well. And so I hope that, I guess that lesson was learned last night, and we hope it'll be instructive moving forward.
Is that a message for Cuba?
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
You said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. So who's in power right now?
Well, we're going to be running it with a group, and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars. It'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. They will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. As you know, it was just a minor flow. It was actually a minor flow for what they have. but we're going to run it properly, and we're going to make sure the people of Venezuela are taken care of. We're going to make sure the people that were forced out of Venezuela by this thug are also taken care of.
Mr. President,
does the U.S. running the country mean that U.S. troops will be on the ground? How will that work?
Well, you know, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it. But we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain. This is a very dangerous attack. This is an attack that could have gone very, very badly. Could have gone very badly. We could have lost a lot of people last night. We could have lost a lot of dignity. We could have lost a lot of equipment. The equipment is less important, but we could have lost a lot. And we're going to make sure that this is proper. We're there now. We're ready to go again if we have to. We're going to run the country right. It's going to be run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. We're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. We're going to take care of everybody. It's very important. We couldn't let them get away with it. You know, they stole our oil. We built that whole industry there. And they just took it over like we were nothing. And we had a president that decided not to do anything about it. So we did something about it. We're late, but we did something about it. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you explain the exact mechanism by which you're going to run the country? Are you going to designate a U.S. official to coordinate?
It's all being done right now. We're designating people. We're talking to people. We're designating various people, and we're going to let you know who those people are.
Mr. President,
what's the group you mentioned that would run Venezuela?
Well, it's largely going to be for a period of time. The people that are standing right behind me, we're going to be running it. We're going to be bringing it back. It's a dead. You know, I talk about a dead country. A year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're a country doing better than any country anywhere in the world. And it required leadership. Venezuela has a lot of bad people in there, a lot of bad people that shouldn't be leading. We're not going to take a chance that one of those people take over for Maduro. So you can look at, and others, we have fantastic people, including people in the military. So we're going to have a group of people running it until such time as it can be put back on track, make a lot of money for the people, and give people a great way of life, and also reimbursement for people in our country that were forced out of Venezuela.
Rubio would be.
You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
going? I
understand
she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He's just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is about that.
Well, he has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved.
Sure. We call members of Congress immediately after. This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days. But it's largely a law enforcement function. Remember, at the end of the day, at its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, and the Department of War supported the Department of Justice in that job. Now, there are broader policy implications here, but it's just not the kind of mission that you can pre-notify because it endangers the mission.
Plus, if I can add one thing to that, Congress has a tendency to leak. This would not be good. If they leaked, General, I think it would have been maybe a very different result. But I have to say, they knew we were coming at some point. You know, we had a lot of ships out there. They sort of knew we were coming. We weren't. But Congress will leak, and we don't want leakers.
Mr. President,
You were one of the only people to watch this all play out live. What was Maduro doing when the U.S. forces entered what I assume would be his home? And also, was there any point where the U.S. was considering if Maduro pushed back or resisted killing Maduro?
It could have happened. It could have happened. He was trying to get into a safe place. You know, the safe place is all steel. And he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast. They went through the opposition so fast. And there was a lot of opposition. You know, people were wondering, did we get them by surprise? Sort of surprised, but they were waiting for something. It was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of gunfire. You saw some of it today. But he was trying to get to a safe place, which wasn't safe because we would have had the door blown up in about 47 seconds, they say on average, regardless of how thick the steel was. It was a very thick door. It was a very heavy door, but he was unable to get to that door. He made it to the door. He was unable to close it.
So where's Maduro?
Go ahead, finish.
Where is Maduro going to be in the time being right now? Do you know his exact
Well,
whereabouts?
eventually, ultimately, in the near future, he's going to be brought to New York.
And where is he going to be held? Where is he going to be held in New York? Do you know?
That's going to be up to the officials that do these things.
Mr. President, the U.S. has something of a mixed track record of ousting dictators without necessarily a plan for what comes afterwards. Did that weigh on your decision?
Well, that's why we had different presidents, but with me, that's not true. With me, we've had a perfect track record of winning. We win a lot, and we win. If you look at Soleimani, you look at al-Baghdadi, you look at the Midnight Hammer. Midnight Hammer was incredible. Right now, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. We have essentially peace in the Middle East because of that. If we weren't successful with Midnight Hammer, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. So with me, you've had a lot of victory. You've had only victories. You've had no losses. Yeah.
Mr. President, can you? How long do you expect the U.S. to run Venezuela, and how soon do you want Venezuelan people to hold elections?
So I'd like to do it quickly, but it takes a period of time. You know, we're rebuilding. We have to rebuild their whole infrastructure. The infrastructure is rotted.
Yeah, I mean, Trump does make a good point, though. We have had all victories, and we have had transitions. Well, Iran, no, but everyone else, yes. But it wasn't just Trump that got involved with this. It was Israel, because Israel, for the first time, openly admitted to Trump in September 2025 that they had nukes and that they will blow up Iran if Iran was successful with their program. And we only had 2 weeks to do it. So yes, there is peace now in the Middle East without an Iranian nuclear program. We attacked 6 other countries. We don't know the status of them. But Venezuela, we're actually getting a confirmed status that we are running that country. Oh, wait, Gaza. Israel, though, the peace deal didn't last even 72 hours. But in the end, at least it's democracy running it. But now in Venezuela, we're going to run it until an actual democratic government can take hold in Venezuela. Now, with that in mind, and yes, we have had all victories under the first year of Trump's presidency in his second term, but you never know. We'll see. I was very young. I was like only 10 or 11 when that Baghdad shit took place. And all those other countries, but yeah, we'll see.
It's actually very dangerous. It's blow up territory. Oil is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing to take.
Trump is right about that. If you put a bomb next to an oil field, you're fucked. You are fucked. Big time. Why? Well, first off, oil and heat, that creates fire, more explosions, more climate scenarios, more issues. Now, the problem with that issue alone is why we have to avoid using as many bombs near oil fields as much. But with Yemen, though, that oil field was fueling their machine, so we had no choice but to blow it up. But as you can see, that massive explosion that took place. So yeah, I kind of see where Trump's coming from.
take out of the ground can kill a lot of people. It has killed a lot of people doing just that. The infrastructure is old. It's rotted. Much of it is stuff that we put there 25 years ago. And we're going to be replacing it. And we're going to take a lot of money out so that we can take care of the country.
Are you saying that Secretary Rubio and
Mr. President, China, Russia, and Iran have interests in Venezuela. How does this operation affect your relationships with them when it comes to the oil and drugs?
And Russia, Russia when we get things straightened out. But in terms of other countries that want oil, we're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them. We're not going to say we're not going to. In other words, we'll be selling oil probably in much larger doses because they couldn't produce very much because their infrastructure was so bad. So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries, many of whom are using it now. But I would say many more will come.
Are you saying that, Mr. President, are you saying that?
Mr. President, thank you. What is your message to the people of Venezuela today? Of course, the civilian population specifically, they have a lot of questions. What is your message to the people of Venezuela?
That you're going to have peace, justice. You're going to have some of the riches that you should have had for a long period of time. It was stolen from you. But you're going to have peace and you're going to have safety. You're going to have justice. You're going to have a country. You're going to have a real country. You're going to have potentially a great country. You know, if you go back 20 years, maybe even a little longer ago, that was a great country. And they destroyed it. Remember I said that if we lose this election, the United States will be Venezuela on steroids. That's what would have happened. Had we lost the election, the 2024 election, we suffered so badly. When you look at the border from 2020, what they did, what Joe Biden administration did to our country should never be forgotten. But if we had to go through another year of that, we would be exactly where Venezuela was in terms of, I used to say, if they win, we're going to be Venezuela on steroids. And that's what would have happened.
President, thank you. Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela? And will you be sending in U.S. military troops to provide?
Team that's working with the people of Venezuela to make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, let it go to hell. If we just left, it has zero chance of ever coming back. We'll run it properly. We'll run it professionally. We'll have the greatest oil companies in the world go in and invest billions and billions of dollars and take out money, use that money in Venezuela. And the biggest beneficiary are going to be the people of Venezuela. And also, I can't stress this strongly enough, the people that got thrown out of Venezuela that are now in the United States, and frankly, some want to stay and some probably want to go back. Yeah.
So, Mr. President, what's being done to protect Americans in the country, and were any of the detained Americans?
Well, right now they're very protected because nobody's going to mess with us. They're very protected. The people of, and we let them know that you better not touch one of them.
Are you concerned that bad elements of the Maduro regime will remain in place?
Well, we know who they are. We're on them, and they're acting much differently now than they would have acted 2 days ago.
And what do you say
wait,
about,
behind you, please.
Mr. President, why is running a country in South America America first?
Well, I think it is because we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. We want to surround ourselves with stability. We want to surround ourselves with energy. We have tremendous energy in that country. It's very important that we protect it. We need that for ourselves. We need that for the world. And we want to make sure we can protect it. Yes, sir. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, is there a message here for Cuba and Diaz-Canel?
Well, Cuba is an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And
Donald Trump is actually true with this. That is true. Cuba's power grid is failing every day. Like either half of the nation is without power, 3/4 of the nation, and most of the time the whole nation is without power. The Cuban government has to take measures to conserve power so they can keep the power grids up and running. And they blame the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has had an embargo on them since 1962, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, yes, Cuba is actually a failing country.
And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba, but we want to also help the people that were forced out of Cuba and living in this country. Do you want to say something about that, Marco, please?
Well, I mean, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. I mean, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems the Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba. They tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned, it's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there. So that's an increase.
We've just been listening to President Trump's news conference at Mar-a-Lago. That's going to conclude this portion of NBC News' special report. You can continue to watch our special coverage of the U.S. attack on Venezuela on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Tom Yamas reporting today from Miami. We thank you for watching this special report.
The money coming out of the ground is very substantial, so it's not going to cost us
the US
anything.
isn't going to dedicate
We
any
will.
money to
Well, we want safety there. We want to be surrounded by countries that aren't housing all of our enemies all over the world. That's what that was happening, and you don't want to have that. But we're going to be rebuilding, and we're spending money. The oil companies are going to go in. They're going to spend money. We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago. A lot of money is coming out of the ground. We're going to get reimbursed for all of that. We're going to get reimbursed for everything that we spend. So it's going to be a very important. This is a very big evening that took place last night. We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries. And we also have to have energy. Very important. We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look, it was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Mr. President,
U.S. military.
Mr. President, thank you. What did you last speak to Maduro about when you spoke? And is the
Well,
US
I don't want to
at
get
war
into
with
the
Venezuela?
conversations, but I did have conversations with him, and I said, you got to surrender. And I actually thought he was pretty close to doing so, but now he wished he did, yeah.
Mr. President, can you explain, you said that Maduro is responsible for drug trafficking. You recently pardoned the former president of Honduras who was convicted of many drug trafficking. Can you explain how these two situations are different? And would you ever pardon Maduro?
I endorsed, as you know, the winning president, the man who won in Honduras. I endorsed the man who won in Chile. I endorsed the man who won in Argentina. And we are doing very well with that whole group. What the man that I pardoned was, if you could equate it to us, he was treated like the Biden administration treated a man named Trump. That didn't work out too well for them. A man who was persecuted very unfairly. He was the head of the country. He was persecuted very unfairly. And there are a number of them. And we felt that it was a very unfair situation that happened to him. He's also a party member of the man who won. So obviously the people liked what I did. And one of the reasons that was done is because of the fact that the party in power felt very strongly that that man was treated very badly. I studied it very quickly, and then I studied it in great detail. I went to a lot of the people standing behind me, and they felt that that man was persecuted and treated very badly. That's why I gave him a pardon.
Mr. President, you referenced boots on the ground earlier. Can you just sort of button this up? Do you envision the U.S. military having a presence in Venezuela as the U.S. runs that country?
No, we're going to have a presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil, because we have to have, we're sending our expertise in. So you may need something, not very much. But no, we're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground. And that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused us by that country. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you. Do you have one? Yes, please. You were so nice before. I'm going to give you the final question. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Mr.
Unless it's a
President.
bad question, in
It's
which
about
case I'll
Putin.
go one word. It's about who?
It's about Putin, if you want.
About Putin. Well, that's always nice
You had
to
a phone
talk about Putin.
you had a phone call with him on Monday. Did he talk at all about Maduro? Did y'all talk about this?
No, we didn't.
And
We
then-
never spoke about Maduro.
Are you mad at him right now? I mean, there's this
I'm not
intelligence.
thrilled with Putin. I'm not thrilled with Putin. He's killing too many people.
There was that
I
intelligence.
thought that would be so. I settled 8 1/4 war. You know what the 1/4 was? Thailand and Cambodia. I did it again. They broke out, and I did it in about 5 hours, and I settled it. I'm giving myself 1/4, so I'm up to now 8 1/4. In other words, I settled the war, but then they broke out. They had a pretty bad breakout over the last 4 days. I got them to go back to peace. So I only give 1/4. I thought the easiest one would be, one of the easier ones would be Russia, Ukraine. It's not. And they both have done some pretty bad things. And look, that's Biden's war. That's not my war. But I want to stop the lives. Did you see where last month, 30,000, it was 27,000 the month before. 30,000, mostly soldiers, were killed this last month. 30,000. I want to stop that. You know, I got NATO to pay 5% instead of the 2% that they weren't paying. They weren't paying 2, now they pay 5. And we send them a lot of munitions. We send them a lot of things, missiles and various other things, a lot. And they pay. The United States is not losing money. We're probably making money on that. It's the last thing I care about. I just want to stop all those people. We're losing 25, 30,000 human beings that come from 2 places that are very far away. But if I can stop, because it's something I've been pretty good at doing, deals, I guess. It's all a deal. Life is a big deal. But if I can stop that war and stop 30,000 young people, in addition to the fact that people are being killed in Kiev, people are being killed in other cities throughout, you know, a much smaller number, but they're being killed, viciously killed. So I'm not happy about it. I thought that would be something that would get solved. We have Mr. Witkoff here. I think that we're making progress, but that's a war that should have never happened. If I were president, it would have never happened. Putin says it. Everybody says it. If I were president, that would have never happened. But I inherited that war. That was Joe Biden, Zelensky, and Putin. I came into the situation, and it's a mess. And I will say this. I watched an operation last night that was so precise, that was so brilliant. I mean, it was incredible. If we had our people, like this general and our people involved, that war would not have gone on very long, that I can tell you. That war, to use an old term, that war has become a bloodbath, and we want it to get stopped. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've just been listening to President Trump's news conference there at Mar-a-Lago and learning the details of Operation Absolute Resolve. This was the operation, the military and law enforcement operation to take out Nicolas Maduro and his wife out of power in Venezuela, along with the overnight attack on some Venezuelan military installations. A lot of headlines coming out of this news conference, namely the president saying in very plain English, we're going to run the country. The United States is going to run the country. The way he explains that is that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been in contact with the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, who has just been sworn in as president. This is interesting because Delcy Rodriguez is both a student of the first socialist leader there in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and worked under, as vice president, Nicolas Maduro. But according to President Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has talked to her. She is willing to work with the United States government. This, according to President Trump. At the same time, there are reports that on Venezuelan state media, she right now is denouncing the attack. She was also earlier asking for proof of life of Nicolás Maduro and his wife as well. The president putting out a photo of what Maduro looks like right now. He is in custody. He was in handcuffs. He was given blacked out sunglasses. You can see him wearing earmuffs there aboard what we believe is the Iwo Jima, this picture put out by the Trump administration. The president also saying that U.S. oil companies will go into Venezuela and rebuild that oil industry. That oil industry has had several setbacks going back to the Chavez administration, where they went from producing 3.5 million barrels of oil a day to 1 million barrels of oil a day. The infrastructure is old. The staffing is not as expert, if you will, as the companies in the United States and other parts of the world. And the president saying Venezuela is going to work with the U.S. to do that, to get that infrastructure up and running. But again, the headline here, the U.S. seems to be in charge in Venezuela, at least according to President Trump. I want to bring in Peter Alexander, who was monitoring that news conference and, of course, was covering all the breaking news as it was happening overnight. Peter, a lot of headlines, a lot of stunning sort of things coming out from President Trump's mouth, which is something that we should be used to by now. But this idea that he's going to use members of the Maduro administration to still run Venezuela, and then also saying at this news conference that the opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize should not be the leader because she is not respected and she wouldn't have the support there. Quite remarkable.
Tom, I think as dramatic as the overnight developments were, the strikes in Venezuela and the capture of Nicolás Maduro and his wife, at least as dramatic and stunning. The president's own comments in this news conference that just wrapped up at Mar-a-Lago moments ago. I'll circle three key headlines that strike me. You touched on some of them right now. The U.S. is, in effect, in the president's words, going to run that country indefinitely. There is no clear timetable for when that ends. In the president's own words during those remarks, it's all being done right now as he tries to detail exactly what that is going to look like, briefly turning around to members of his own cabinet, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, among others, saying these guys are going to be working with those leaders who succeed Nicolás Maduro in the country. Number two, the president did not rule out the possibility of boots on the ground in Venezuela. For a president who came to power saying that he had no interest in starting wars, wanted to end wars, the idea of American troops being on the ground in another foreign country, as critical he has been in the past of the situation that took place with boots on the ground in Iraq and elsewhere, I think that is a particularly dramatic statement. We are already hearing from some of the president's allies and others detailing that the president needs to do a better job describing what that transition process in particular will look like. And finally, the U.S. is, in effect, in the oil business. The president saying that American oil companies will now go in, as he describes it. It's, the conversation inside the boardrooms of the Shells and Exxons right now is probably a pretty interesting one, spending billions of dollars of their own money, saying, in effect, that they are pumping money out of the ground that country is right now. Is the U.S. the beneficiary of that money? Under what authorities is the U.S. doing any of this, taking over that country and effectively seizing its oil? I think those are a lot of the questions we're going to be focused on over the course of the day. There are other topics, I think, that relate to the dramatic nature of what happened earlier today. We heard from the Joint Chiefs Chairman, Dan Raisin Kane, his nickname Raisin, as the president likes to refer to him, detailing that there were aircraft taking off from 20 separate bases. I think he said it was 150 separate aircraft that were involved in this operation. One of them was struck during the back and forth that took place here, but that was able to continue to fly. He detailed the extraordinary efforts by American service members from age 20 to age 49, the breadth of the range of those who are participating here. So while the good news is that all American service members and forces involved appear to be okay, there are enormous questions to be raised about what the days, weeks, months, and frankly, years will look like in Venezuela. He put no limits on the operations to take place there going forward. He has not ruled out boots on the ground. He did not set any end date here as well, Tom. You just have to pull back the curtain and remember, for an American first policy, that's how the president first came to power, the first go around, returned to office. Again, this go around, this is a dramatic change. And I think it was clear that he tried to make an effort to focus this on the impact on Americans in terms of drugs and thugs, as he effectively put it. Now he's going to have to do, I think, a lot more explaining to the American people going forward. Tom?
Peter, stand by for us. The president also saying multiple times that the people of Venezuela will now be rich, they will be independent, and they will be safe. I want to bring in Courtney Cuby to walk us through the military actions that took place. Peter highlighted a few points there. No U.S. service member killed or injured from what we understand in this attack. No machinery lost, even though it sounds like a helicopter took some fire there. The president saying it was an attack from air, land, and sea. And as Peter said, you had 20 bases activated, more than 150 aircraft in the air. And this is the part, Courtney, I want you to walk our viewers through. The president said he saw this in real time. Walk our viewers through how that happens and how the president in that situation room, per se, is able to watch all the military action and essentially the taking of Maduro into custody.
Yeah, so primarily through gun camera video, drones, is how we would be able to watch the operation as they're moving in on the compound. And then video that the troops themselves may have on their helmets, on their bodies, whatever it is that can provide a live feed. So the president can literally be watching it as it's unfolding. So what we learned here, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, provided what's essentially sort of a military postmortem of what happened here with some actual details of this military mission here. Absolute Resolve's the name of the mission. He referred to it as a U.S. military apprehension mission. And what's shocking is he was able to walk us through the months and months of planning and rehearsing that occurred before the military went forward with this. Notably, he mentioned that they spent months tracking Nicolas Maduro, looking at where he went, even mentioning his pets, people who he met with, his daily routine, what the military would often call pattern of life. They established that over months. In early December, coming back to the Pentagon, coming back to President Trump and saying that they were ready for this mission after these months of preparation. Now, at 10:46 last night, President Trump, according to General Kane, gave the final order to move forward with this mission, at which point, as you mentioned, the U.S. military launched more than 150 aircraft from 20 bases. That's not only on land, but that includes launching aircraft, both fixed wing or airplanes and helicopters off of the many U.S. Navy ships that were there off the coast. They've been there now for weeks and months. F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, Growlers, those are jammers, and the drones, some of which were probably providing the feedback to the president as it was occurring. Now, these aircraft and these men and women who were involved in this mission essentially provided a pathway for this extraction mission, meaning that they were able to do things like jam electricity. President Trump mentioned that at the top of his remarks, and provide a safer environment for the extraction team to actually move into the compound and get Nicolas Maduro and his wife. We learned from General Kane that it was about 2:01 a.m. local time. That would be 1:01 a.m. So just over 2 hours after the president gave that go order, there was an extraction team in the compound to pick up Nicolas Maduro. And really notably, General Kane also talked about a gun battle that ensued, not only as they were moving in, but notably as they were leaving the compound. He described it as the U.S. responding with overwhelming fire back during that extraction. You mentioned that one U.S. aircraft was hit. He said that it was not catastrophically damaged. It was able to continue to fly and return. The mission essentially ending at 3:29 a.m. Eastern time, when that extraction force made it back to the Navy ship, the USS Iwo Jima. We've been looking at that video or that photo there that President Trump put on social media of Nicolas Maduro. You can tell, one of the ways that you can tell looking at that he's on a Navy ship is the life vest that he's wearing around his neck there. You can see the sort of little beads on the side. That's what you pull to inflate those Navy life vests. I'm well aware of them, and the earmuffs that he's wearing there, they often make individuals wear a cranial when they're on these ships for safety, especially when you're coming and going on and off the aircraft. A couple of other things that really stuck out to me. Peter mentioned that the president did not rule out the possibility of U.S. boots on the ground and acknowledged that, hey, they put boots on the ground overnight last night to get Maduro out. But he also said that if necessary, the U.S. was willing to go in with bigger and more extensive strikes than they did last night. So he specifically said that these were the more targeted ones, and the U.S. has options for bigger strikes. It's not clear, of course, what that would look like, what sorts of strikes they would take here, if that would be going after cartels or what. But that is very notable that he laid out that possibility that the U.S. could go in for more. And then, of course, another big question that was not answered there is, how could Venezuela respond? The president said that the U.S., including Marco Rubio and other senior national security officials in the Trump administration, were essentially going to be running Venezuela during this transition time. But the Venezuelan military has not ruled out that they will respond to this. So that's another big question, is exactly whether the Venezuelan military will respond to what was an attack on them overnight last night, Tom.
Yeah, Courtney, stand by for us, because I do want to come back to you and talk a little bit more about the CIA's operation, which we have some new reporting on there, as well as how many troops and forces we have in the region if things don't exactly work out like the way the president mentioned. I do want to talk about that right now with Jose Diaz-Balart, who joins us live tonight. Jose, you've covered this region. You've spoken and interviewed Machado, who had won the Nobel Peace Prize. She was barred from running for president, and then she supported the other candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, who much of the world said had won that election. But the president's sending a mixed signal here, right? Saying that she did not have the support. She would not have, I think he said support. And he mentioned another phrase as well, the Venezuelan people, that you couldn't be safe as well. I want to ask you, what do you think about that? Because Delcy Rodriguez, who is now the leader of Venezuela, according to President Trump, working with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, she just saw what happened to her former boss. It could happen to her as well. She's got to be thinking that stands to reason. Will she work with the Trump administration? Can she be trusted?
Delcy Rodriguez is not Maduro decaf. She is as dogmatic and as ruthless, and has been responsible, among other things, for the jailing of political prisoners, more than 1,000 political prisoners over these last 25 years of the Chavez-Maduro regime that she has been intricately involved with. Her brother has also been intricately involved in it. I think, Tom, that there are a few things that struck out to me on this extraordinary night that we're witnessing. I'm here in Madrid, Spain, where Edmundo Gonzalez, the man who, for all practical purposes, the entire world agrees won the presidential elections of July of 2024, where Maria Corina Machado ran as vice president because she was inhabilitated from running by the Maduro regime. He's here in Madrid. He's been here so far. I haven't been able to find contact with him since yesterday. I know that they are very much in communication, Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado, with Secretary of State Rubio and others in the Trump administration. But Tom, Secretary of State Rubio, I think that his words, he's a deep student of history. And I just want to bring our viewers up to some pretty extraordinary facts. Today, January 3rd of 2026, is 36 years to the day when the United States arrested Manuel Antonio Noriega, the dictator of Panama, and whisked him out of Panama, brought him to Crone Detention Center in the United States, and he eventually served more than 20 years in prison here before then being sent to France, but to serve other sentences, and then on to Panama. But 36 years to the day of the American invasion of Panama, and 10 days later, the arrest of Noriega, brought to the United States. And what existed in Panama then was a structure. There had been elections, also very muddled, and yet the United States, who took control of Panama, utilizing what had been there in that structure of elections before, when Noriega was in power, was able to have a transition. The United States has something like that right now in Venezuela with Edmundo Gonzalez, and especially Maria Corina Machado. And so the question is, the president spoke about a transition to, transfer of power. How quickly that could be carried out when you have the Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president of the regime. She certainly didn't win anything. Is she going to be willing to step aside? Does she step aside, or does she face justice in a post-Maduro regime Venezuela? The president over and over again talked about an interesting fact. He said, this is going to be great for the Venezuelan people and also for those who have been forced out. We have to remember that more than 8 million Venezuelans have been forced to leave their country over the past 25 years. It's the largest mass migration in the Americas and probably the largest mass migration anywhere in the world in the recent history. And so a lot of those exiles that have been forced to leave are today celebrating with a question mark. When will this transition occur? I'm here once again in Madrid, right in Puerta del Sol, the actual capital center of the capital city. There are dozens of Venezuelans that live here in Madrid with the Venezuelan flag, dancing and celebrating because this is a moment they feel where freedom is possible. And that's an extraordinary thing.
Jose, if you're still with us there, because I know you're joining us via the connection. Okay, I see you're still there with us. I do want to ask you, the people of Venezuela, how do you think they're interpreting this right now? They have been through, as you mentioned, the 25 years of socialist dictatorships. They have lived at times without food, without power, without water. I've been there reporting where people that we worked with, our Venezuelan colleagues, asked us to take a shower in the places that we rented because their homes had no running water. They hadn't showered for weeks, they would tell us. This was typical life in Venezuela. How will they interpret this? Because the president made it a point to say it twice, to say, one, that they will be rich, and one, that they will be free and safe. Will the people of Venezuela understand that? Will they hear that?
Oh, yes. Yes, I think there is a lot of uncertainty, and with uncertainty comes caution, because Maduro is out, but Delcy Rodriguez is there, and the echelon, the high echelon of the Maduro Chavez regime is still there. So I think but make no mistake about it, the fact that the United States of America at 2:10 a.m. Caracas time, not only went in and bombed the military installations of import in Caracas and in some of the ports, but then went in and took out the head of this regime and his wife that are so closely associated with violations of human rights. And you talk about, no power, you talk about no water, you talk about no freedom, Tom. This isn't the country, Venezuela, with the largest oil reserves on planet Earth. And yet, and by the way, some of the largest mines of gold and silver and natural resources, just extraordinarily rich. And yet, the people have been forced to live with the conditions that you mentioned. And so I think I know there is extraordinary celebration throughout Venezuela and throughout the 8 million people who have been forced to leave that country. But there's also the question mark of when will this entire darkness of a regime be over?
We're going to have to wait and see those celebrations happening right here in Miami, down from our studios where we're broadcasting from right now. I want to bring in Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, for more on this. Kristen, the president was asked very plainly, what does America First have to do with what just happened in Venezuela? And the phrase, at least from what the president was saying, seems to be a shape-shifting phrase. It's not just about America. It's about our neighbors as well, as he was saying.
I thought that was a really notable exchange, Tom, and we are starting to get reaction from the president's political allies, from his political foes as well. Let's start with the allies, because there's a lot there. That question about how he justifies this within the broader context of his America First foreign policy. I was talking to one top GOP strategist who said, look, he has got to provide more detail about what this transition looks like. How long does he expect? The possibility of U.S. troops on the ground, as Peter noted, he did leave the door open to that. Who specifically will be in charge? Will it be Secretary of State Marco Rubio working with the newly installed president there? How exactly will that function? I talked to Senator Lindsey Graham on the phone just moments ago, Tom. Let me read you a little bit of our conversation. He said the president's statement was very strong. He believes he sent a message that the days of narco-terrorism, drug caliphates in your backyard are over. So we like that part of the president's statement. He says, look, we have to be patient. So that underscores, I think, Tom, this key takeaway, which is that there is no stated timeline here for how long the president expects the United States to be in control of Venezuela. He talked about the need to rebuild. I pressed him on that very idea. Is he comfortable with the president having control of Venezuela? He said the context makes sense, but he also acknowledged, Tom, long-term operations are difficult. So he called on the administration to secure the oil quickly, help rebuild the institutions, but, quote, the sooner we can have an election, the better. That in unmistakable acknowledgement when you look at the past foreign entanglements of the United States. They are complicated. They drag on. They have cost, of course, U.S. lives. So that call from one of the president's top allies, who's very hawkish when it comes to these sorts of things, Tom, calling for there to be elections as quickly as possible. Of course, the president's critics also speaking out. We're hearing from Democrats, the Democratic leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, saying the idea that President Trump plans to now run Venezuela should strike fear in the hearts of all Americans. The American people have seen this before and paid the devastating price. Congressman Ro Khanna telling me he's engaged in George W. Bush nation building and regime change instead of focusing on building up America. Zooming out, what this means, there will be calls, very loud calls from Congress for briefings to be included in any further and future plans. And I go back to that article that the president's chief of staff, Susie Weiss, participated in with Vanity Fair when she said that any robust military action would require congressional approval. So I think that's part of where this debate is going to go from here. One final point, Tom. Senator Lindsey Graham saying, quote, if I were Cuba, I would be nervous about this news conference. So it speaks to part of your conversation about the implications of this for the broader region, the other countries who are watching this so closely, Cuba at the top of the list, Tom.
Yeah, the domino effect that may occur in Latin America, especially when it comes to oil. Cuba receiving about 40% of its oil from Venezuela, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that could soon end. I want to bring in John Kilduff. He's an oil industry expert at Again Capital, LLC. John, thanks so much for joining our coverage here. There are a lot of unknowns when it comes to what's going to happen with the oil there. The president seem to make it very simple, but I can't imagine it is, that American oil companies are just going to go to Venezuela, rebuild the oil industry there, take back any oil that was nationalized by Hugo Chavez or by Maduro under their reigns of power, given back to American companies who originally owned those, either the oil fields, the platforms he mentioned, or other sort of machinery, and then I guess rebuild and retrain the industry there. How quickly does that happen? Can that happen?
It can happen, Tom. I will tell you that both Exxon, for example, and Chevron are both owed over $1 billion in stranded investments that they made in Venezuela over the decades. So the bones of a terrific oil industry are certainly there. You are talking about Chavez and Maduro lording over a real decimation, literally, of the Venezuelan oil industry. You should note that Venezuela has a rich history in the oil markets. They are a founding member of OPEC. They also have the world's largest oil reserves. Of course, that means oil in the ground that needs to be dug out, not necessarily produced or exported at this point in time. There could be a small bump in their output over the next 6 months, maybe a couple of 100,000 barrels a day, which would help continue the downward pressure that we've been seeing already on oil prices. But I will tell you this, in terms of Cuba, they are in big trouble in terms of their energy supplies going forward. The other thing to note importantly for the U.S. oil industry is that this Venezuelan oil is of a special grade. It's very heavy and sour, particularly well suited for U.S. Gulf Coast oil refineries, which is where it really sprung out from. So there's a lot here in terms of potential for the Venezuelan oil industry, both in the near and long term, given the history, given the infrastructure that is there that could be, repaired rather quickly over time.
For most of us that aren't oil experts like yourself, will Americans notice any difference, whether it be in the price of a barrel of oil, whether it be in the price of a gallon of gasoline here in the United States?
The oil market prices in forward-looking supply increases or decreases very rapidly. I would expect oil prices on Sunday night, when they start trading ahead of the new week here, to be down a couple of dollars a barrel, given what just has transpired and the hopes for what could continue to advance. Chevron has hung in there more than any other U.S. oil company to try to recoup their investment. They have continued up until just recently to get under special licenses and permits about 100,000 to 200,000 barrels a day. They could easily increase that, and that would help lower local or U.S. oil prices in relation to global oil pricing. So yes, U.S. consumers would see a further decrease at the pump on top of what they've already been seeing over the past several months now, Tom.
John, we thank you for your expertise. I want to bring in senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett as well. She's been going through some of the court documents, including these indictments, the initial indictment, and then, of course, what Pam Bondi, the attorney general, said after. Laura, I've been getting texts today throughout our coverage of people asking me why Maduro's wife as well was indicted. She was a high-ranking person in the Venezuelan government, some say as powerful, as popular. If you were somebody who supported Maduro in Venezuela, she was once an attorney general. But both these leaders now indicted, and they will get their day in court in the United States?
They will. And part of the issue here, Tom, is you see this sometimes where the spouse is included in a situation like this, in which they were privy to certain meetings and other dealings in the hopes that eventually she might be able to actually flip on her husband and provide information to the U.S. government that could be useful. I'm not suggesting that that's what's going to happen here, but you've seen that used as sort of a pressure point, if you will, in the past in situations like these. One of the things that was most striking to me, Tom, and I'd be interested to see if you had the same reaction, and listening to the president's lengthy news conference there and talking about the interest in oil and land, that is not what is at issue in this indictment. This indictment is squarely focused on allegations as it relates to drug trafficking, essentially accusing Maduro and his associates at being at the top of an enterprise, a conspiracy, if you will, to traffic drugs through Mexico, through Venezuela, to help known members of law enforcement and violent gangs perpetrate crimes against U.S. citizens. But that is not what the president was talking about. The president was talking about effectively regime change and other matters of important foreign relations and dealings, but not specific crimes that the U.S. would have interest in indicting someone for in the Southern District of New York. And so that's one of the things, as this continues to play out in the weeks and months to come, Tom, that I think that you will see exploited by a zealous defense attorney.
And then we heard something that was interesting in the news conference when it comes to the legal angle on all this. There were two indictments. There's one in New York now. There was one in the Southern District of Florida as well. And I think the president or Secretary of State Marco Rubio said something about they'll figure out where this ends up or where it goes.
Yeah.
We've heard that Maduro's headed to New York, but we don't know which court this ends up in.
I think it's pretty clear that this starts in New York, Tom, because that's the hook that they're using in the indictment that we saw unsealed today. They're casting this as a superseding indictment because obviously his wife and his son have now been indicted. Some other defendants were dropped. The charges are essentially the same in terms of the narco drug trafficking and the conspiracy charges. You did hear the president suggest that Florida could be a potential hook here down the line. And we've seen multi-jurisdiction cases happen like this in the past. That's not unusual. But he's going to have a first stop somewhere. And that first stop appears to be in New York, Tom.
All right, Laura Jarrett, we thank you for your analysis there. I want to bring in Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel. Richard, we were watching this news conference together, going back and forth with our notes about what we had just heard and what the president was saying. It sounds like regime change, but it also sounds like he's working with the government that he just took over. A bit confusing at times, but from the president's words, the current president now, Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president under Maduro, we heard Jose Diaz-Balart just report she is not Maduro light. She is just like Maduro, a student of Hugo Chavez, a socialist. She's now in power, but apparently working with our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And Richard, you know, we have to think she's just seen what's occurred over less than 24 hours in her country. Her boss was just taken in handcuffs from his compound, along with his wife, charged with being narco-terrorists. She's got to be living in fear right now of what's going to happen to her. According to the president, she's playing ball, but in public, she's denouncing everything she just saw.
So, Tom, you're right. We were talking throughout this speech, exchanging notes and pointing out some of the inherent contradictions or inherent challenges of what President Trump is saying. He says quite clearly, and he said it numerous times, that the United States, that he and his administration specifically will be the ones running Venezuela, that he will be in charge, that the people behind him will be in charge. But he said that there may be boots on the ground, but there might not be, that military action might not be necessary, that there could be a second strike, but that he hopes it's not necessary. So he's not talking specifically about a reoccupation of the country or an occupation of the country by American troops. There are roughly 15,000 American troops currently deployed.
I know I missed a lot of information there, but again, I was just letting this play out. Now, this is like the after. Now, the thing is with all this, I was on my phone for a minute, or a little bit. Yeah. The thing is with this, all this has played out, over and over. The Venezuelan president who was just sworn in, is already in fear, as they should be. The world is in fear, as they kind of should be, especially our nation's enemies. Like, I just think having our enemies run in fear is actually kind of funny, not gonna lie. But yeah.
With their guns trained toward Venezuela, that is an enormous.
Venezuela in this way, aligning with your America First ideals. And you heard the president respond that he thinks this is a national security issue. And that's why he got involved here. But I will say this, when you look broadly at the American people, there's some recent polling in just the last couple of weeks showing that the majority of voters do not want to see U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. And so with that, we're going to thank Tom. We're going to look forward to seeing more of his reporting coming up in just a little bit on Nightly News. He will be back with us right here on NBC News. But for now, I'm Hallie Jackson in Washington as we continue our breaking news coverage of the attack on Venezuela. Of course, Nicolas Maduro, the now former leader of Venezuela, taken into custody. In just the last hour or so, we heard from President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in that lengthy news conference saying the U.S. will, in his words, run Venezuela, will take control of Venezuela basically indefinitely here until there is a peaceful transfer of power. But again, no timeline set on that. The president not ruling out boots on the ground. All of it just coming as you've watched unfold here live in our rolling coverage hours after the U.S. staged that large-scale attack in the Venezuelan capital, removing that country's controversial leader, Nicolas Maduro, along with Maduro's wife. Both of them, we understand, are now headed to New York. They're expected to face criminal charges related to alleged narco-terrorism and other crimes. There is a lengthy indictment we're going to get into coming out of the Southern District of New York. And make no mistake, this is a big deal. This is a big moment here that marks the most direct American intervention in Latin America in decades. We've got a lot to cover here over the course of the next several hours. We expect more developments as the afternoon unfolds. You can watch them right here on NBC News. And I want to start with our chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons. And Keir, just to set the table here for a moment, there is now an indefinite time period where the United States will effectively run Venezuela. You heard the president talk about getting involved in oil, rebuilding, as he said, the oil infrastructure, using, frankly, the royal we, saying we will, talk about and decide what we do with this oil. There's that piece of it here. There's the question of Nicolas Maduro himself, what a trial would look like for him in this incredibly high profile way. And then some of the critical.
It's a lot of lives. So I'm going to stop sharing. I know I missed a lot. So I'm going to go over some of it. Trump giving us a conference, now that we have everything, some of it's repetitive, but again, it's a mixed reaction from the world on behalf of this. I know I didn't do a lot of talking, but I got a phone call, so I had to do that. I mean, I can't turn off my camera because I'm not streaming physically, so but yeah, what do you all think about all this? What should the U.S. do, or what should the U.S. not have done? in response with this. What do you think the U.S. should do next? What do you think? Who do you think the U.S.'s next target will be? It's been pointed out that Cuba is going to hurt economically even more, so I'm assuming Cuba is going to be next. But what do you all think down below? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. You can follow me on YouTube if there's a follow page. Follow me on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Again, content I do not have posted on is Instagram and LinkedIn. That will change in the months to come. I'm also going to reveal some. I also want to plan out another playlist, EAS wise. I want to try to create my first EAS scenario, but that will be months down the road. I want to make sure I have streaming equipment for that. So you're not going to have that one anytime soon. Because I realized, schooling and everything. All right. Stay safe. Enjoy the remainder of your holiday season. And take care now. Have a good one. Bye-bye.